Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into political status through American history. We'll be looking directly at the source documents to explore the exact historical and administrative framework that defines political status, nationality, and citizenship in America. Let's just jump right in.
Our agenda covers early concepts of status, historical developments and changes, nationality versus citizenship, rights and responsibilities, participation in governance, and finally, a summary of political status.
Starting off with Section 1, Early Concepts of Status.
According to the framework in the source documents, an American state national represents your fundamental birthright status. This is literally the baseline before any sort of misidentification through birth registration even happens. Basically, Americans take their nationality from their specific state of the Union, like being a Texan or a New Yorker. We're talking about living, breathing beings who actually govern the soil, the surface water, and the air.
Now here is where it gets incredibly specific. Exact capitalization fundamentally dictates your jurisdictional standing. For example, the word people with a lowercase p represents living beings operating in soil jurisdiction. That's tied to lowercase state names like Virginia with a little v. But capitalize that p to make it people, and suddenly you're identified as lawful persons operating in the land jurisdiction, which ties to capitalized state names like Virginia with a capital V. One little letter changes the whole shebang.
Moving on to Section 2, Historical Developments and Changes.
The source materials actually map out a timeline that leads right up to a continuous state of national emergency since 1933. It kicks off with the Civil War and the Lieber Code martial law instructions. Then, a massive shift happened in 1868 when the 14th Amendment established a federal citizenship. This basically acted as a subclass of original state citizenship. Following that, we hit the Trading with the Enemy Act in 1917, and then the 1933 Amendatory Act, which essentially locked in that continuous emergency state.
So why does this timeline actually matter for you today? Well, the framework asserts that by registering Americans as federal U.S. citizens, the administrative entity steps into the role of parens patriae. That's a legal doctrine that literally means parent of the country. Under the specific status, the texts state that individuals are reduced to wards of the state. So instead of operating as independent, self-governing state nationals, people are placed right under government administration. Expanding on this administrative structure, the framework explicitly identifies the modern United States as a corporate entity operating under statutory jurisdiction. It functions through distinct subcontractors, specifically the territorial subcontractor and the municipal subcontractor. Each of these has its own distinct seals and jurisdictions, and they operate completely separately from the land and soil jurisdictions of the several states.
Which brings us to Section 3, Nationality versus Citizenship.
It's fascinating how strictly these jurisdictional boundaries are compartmentalized. State nationals operate on the soil and state citizens operate on the land, with both groups governed by the Declaration of Independence. On the flip side, federal workers operate under administrative jurisdiction, entirely bound by the federal constitutions. It's basically a giant sorting system.
The text emphasizes a really crucial functional difference here. While a state national holds the baseline birthright and is absolutely owed constitutional guarantees, stepping up to become a state citizen is the prerequisite for actually enforcing those guarantees. Basically, to enforce the contract, you have to stand in the capacity of your lawful person on the land.
Let's get into Section 4, Rights and Responsibilities.
The texts actually outline a required administrative process to correct your records and formally return your status to the land and soil. It's not just a concept. There is specific paperwork involved. You have to provide a copy of your birth certificate, secure 2 witness testimonies, and complete the 1779 one-page declaration.
But listen, with this correction comes a very specific set of duties. First off, to adopt the state national status, you must be at least 21 years old. And while correcting your status gets you out from under statutory municipal jurisdiction, it replaces it with public duties. You are obligated to obey the non-statutory public law and to keep the peace. Plus, a state national can only vote on local, county, and state matters. They actually cannot vote on international contracts or affairs unless they officially step up to become a state citizen.
The framework uses a brilliant analogy of a hamster wheel to describe the frustration people feel when they avoid true self-governance. The texts argue that by relying on the statutory administrative system instead of governing yourself on the land, you're essentially just stuck running in an endless loop. Self-government requires active, responsible participation. It's a public duty. Plain and simple. As the text puts it, if you are unsatisfied with the speed of change and aren't doing your duty to self-govern, well, there's the wheel, hamster.
That brings us to Section 5, Participation in Governance.
Once status is corrected, the framework outlines a highly structured bottom-up approach to community and state governance, which is entirely distinct from the corporate federal system. It's strictly defined as a peaceful gathering of men and women on the land. It completely rejects the top-down federal government model, opting instead for a committee-based community-building structure that includes specific bodies like the General Assembly, the militia, and international business assemblies.
There's a really vital principle within this framework regarding authority. The texts stress that within these state assemblies, there is absolutely no positional authority, only functional authority. Elected positions like a chairperson or a militia leader carry purely functional administrative duties. The text explicitly rejects any positional superiority, noting that officials do not, like the pigs in Animal Farm, become more equal than anyone else. It ensures that those in office can never secure special authority over any other member.
And finally, Section 6, Summary of Political Status.
The ultimate goal presented in these records is the systematic correction of title and political status. It's really about actively correcting the paperwork to reassemble their lawful standing and your authority to act on behalf of your state of the Union. It's like putting all the pieces of a giant puzzle back into their proper places.
So let's look at the primary takeaways from this framework. The 14th Amendment bifurcated citizenship. The modern U.S. operates as an administrative corporate entity. Correcting your status requires formal, explicit paperwork. True self-governance relies on a bottoms-up functional assembly. And finally, exactly how you capitalize a word fundamentally dictates your jurisdictional standing.
We'll leave you with this provocative thought. Based solely on the historical and administrative records we reviewed today, how does acknowledging the distinction between little p people and capital P people fundamentally change an individual's role in self-governance? Think about how deeply words, capitalization, and administrative classifications might impact your foundational rights. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and keep questioning how the structures around us define our standing.